77. James Buchal joins me now, running for Attorney General. How you doing, James?
I'm fine, thanks.
Listen, I was glad to see that while I was gone goofing around, you were actually about the serious work you're trying to keep the government in line. You're taking issue with the way the state is handling this case involving the multi-million-dollar fraud perpetrated by the young lady who filed the tax return claiming she'd made $3 million and was owed a $2 million refund.
Yeah, I think it's very bad that the state is sort of clamping down to prevent us from finding out what went wrong and what they're going to do about it, and that my opponent is collaborating in that.
And in fact, your opponent has backed up the idea that they don't have to release any of this information to the public about who at the Department of Revenue was involved in making these decisions?
It's not just who, it's exactly what went wrong. We can't even know what went wrong. It's like that scene in Star Wars, you know, where they're in that room taking out the stormtroopers and somebody calls in and what's going on, and it's just a slight weapons malfunction or something.
Yeah? No kidding. Well, and here's the problem. A lot of us have a tough time understanding how anybody could make a mistake like that. And I say this not being a tax expert or anything. You're an attorney. That's why you're running for Attorney General. You're qualified. But when I look at it, I think if somebody did make a salary of $3 million, which is relatively unusual, I don't know how many people in the state of Oregon pull down a W-2 for $3 million, but I'll bet it's a very small number of people who get a W-2. There may be people who make other kinds of investment like rental income for that, but a W-2 for $3 million is relatively unusual. To claim that you had $2 million withheld when anybody who's had any kind of dealings with the federal government knows that the feds take about a third of a larger paycheck. And so if you make $100,000, the feds are usually going to withhold 25 or 30 grand. So this person would have had $2 million withheld by Oregon, $1 million withheld by the feds, would have made $3 million on her W-2 and not have had a paycheck to take home for an entire year. I guess it could happen. It just doesn't seem very likely.
No, the return would have been staggeringly and obviously fraudulent, and only an agency that was in some sense totally dysfunctional could fail to uncover this.
So if you were Attorney General, how much of this should be made public?
I think almost all of it. I mean, I think that the public, there's two ways of looking at the government. And one is that everything's fine here, you know, there's occasional little mistakes. And the other is that we have a very serious cancer here with all of these agencies becoming more and more dysfunctional and failing to provide their services and sucking down massive quantities of tax resources for which we get nothing. And that a very radical new approach toward opening up the government so we can see what's gone wrong is required here.
Well, the other thing I'd like to know, and James, I had somebody suggest to me, and I will tell you that this is complete. I have no way of vetting this information. I've tried to pry the information loose, but I had a few people who emailed claiming to be on the inside on that one, saying they believe there might have been some collaboration between somebody at Department of Revenue and the young lady who ended up pleading guilty to the charge of the fraudulent return. But we have no way of finding that out unless we know something more about it. And of course, state government has no great interest in telling us just how screwed up things are. So, you know, this is one of those where I think the fourth estate, journalism, could have done some good for the state by taking a look. Was there any relationship at all, friends, family, whatever, between the people on the inside who said okay to this crazy return and the woman on the outside who filed it and apparently believed? See, this is the one I'm having a tough time with. There are plenty of con artists out there and lots of identity thieves and people who are pulling scams and things like that. But why would the person have sat down and said, I think I can get away with throwing a $3 million W-2 at the state and they'll simply okay it and send me the money? Most fraud artists would have tried something that sounded a little more believable. You know, they would have said, well, I made $300,000 and I had, 10% of that, $30,000 withheld by the state of Oregon, and I want $30,000 back. What made this crook believe that she could fool them into thinking she'd had 2/3 of a $3 million salary withheld by the state?
Well, I can probably answer that, but I want to state my total agreement with the proposition that for my opponent as Attorney General to sort of not let the information out is totally interfering with the job of the media to help us fix the government. But in fact, I can tell you what probably happened, and that is that this agency is totally and staggeringly dysfunctional, and she may have known it. My understanding is that this agency has 200 computer flags that click on returns and send them off for suspense review.
Right.
And that then, but they have so many of them, and they're so poorly designed that 10% of all returns are flagged. Then they have this crew of people who are doing it, and they're graded on some sort of production scheme as by their managers. And so what they do is they check one or two out of the 200 flags, and must be fine, instead of checking them all or however many triggered. And if someone were on the inside of that agency and could see how things could get through, why, they might conclude that this scam would work.
And that's where I go back to my original question. Was there any kind of friendship or familial operation, a familial understanding or friendship relationship between the fraud artist and whoever it was that let things, or somebody else within the agency? Because, if you went and told your friends, God, we're so screwed up at work, we only look at 2 or 3% of the actual returns, that kind of information from the inside of a revenue agency might be enough to do what you just suggested, which is, you're a fraud artist, go for the brass ring, file a gigantic return and see what happens. And it also makes you wonder, if one crook knew that flaw, how many other crooks knew that flaw? Since, the word does tend to get around. Yeah.
And as long as we sort of clamp up on what's going on in there, and we hide these employees so they don't have their chance to defend themselves and tell the media what's really going on, we can't have any confidence that this is going to be fixed. It's going to turn into another. I've read some of the reports they've issued, and now they're going to recomputerize everything to fix it, and it's probably going to be just like another one of these DMV computer things where they spend 10, 20, 50, 60, $100 million, and they're left with nothing that works again.
James, I got to tell you, I don't know. I know so many people who've had their credit card shut off because of a fraud alert. And sometimes they're real and sometimes they're not. I've had it happen to me. And I've compared notes with people. Many people that I know of all kinds of different income levels have had their card shut off because they go outside their pattern. Now, the private sector seems to be pretty good at this. At least, Visa, American Express, MasterCard, all those folks. Wouldn't you think that private companies like that, or the folks who work for them or work with them, would be capable of telling the state of Oregon, here's how you program a computer system to watch for this kind of fraud? It's not rocket science.
Of course this can be fixed, but as long as you have an attorney general who's committed to covering up just how screwed up it is, nobody understands how desperate the need to fix it is.
James Buchal is running for attorney general. What's your website so folks can help you out with your campaign and remember to vote for you this fall?
www.buchal.com, Buchal.
James, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you.